The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is an early slasher film from the 70s. It was considered to be the most commercially successful film since The Exorcist at the time of its release, and proved to be so disturbing in the previews that most people left the cinema whilst the preview was still showing. The film maintains a really dark and gritty atmosphere throughout, and the poor imagery adds to the overall horror-inducing experience you feel whilst watching the film. The story centres around a group of young adults led by Sally, who wants to investigate the apparent vandalism to her grandfather's grave. She's accompanied by her handicapped brother Franklin, her boyfriend Jerry, and her two other friends, Pam and Kirk. On the way, they pick up a creepy-looking hitchhiker whilst out on the road. Even though one of the females state that they think it's a bad idea to do it, they still decide to pick up the hitchhiker anyway, which proves to be a big mistake. As soon as he's in there with the other characters, you can really tell by his dirty appearance and crazed look that he differs from the rest of the group. He soon begins talking about how his family used to be a part of the slaughterhouse in the area, and how he used to do most of the killings there. Later he begins to cut himself with a knife, then takes a picture of the group and offers them the picture for money. Due to them refusing, he lights a fire in the back of the camper van and stabs Franklin before the group finally kick him out. This scene is quite effective at setting the tone for the unnerving chain of events that follow. Later they arrive at the deserted farm of Sally's grandfather, where upon exploring the area, Pam and Kirk stumble across a strange-looking farmhouse in the hope to buy gasoline from the inhabitants. What follows is the beginning of the massacre. The narration at the beginning of the film states that the film is based on true events, and that the title, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, was a real thing. However, the story and characters of the film are entirely fictional, and only a small proportion of the film is partly based on real-life serial killer Ed Gein, whose crimes were the source material for Norman Bates in Psycho and Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs. In the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's the character of Leatherface who carries mild references to the real-life killer, by wearing a mask made of human flesh. The house in the film, which mainly consists of human remains incorporated into the furniture, is also based on the fact that Ed Gein decorated his house with his victims. Speaking of the house in the film, it was apparently quite difficult for the actors to work in, as it was made up of decomposing meat and rotting animals. As soon as each scene was shot, supposedly the actors ran towards the windows to get air and even throw up. The film was made on a small budget, so I guess it's understandable that they had to find alternatives to use on set, but in a way I think it makes the whole surroundings much more realistic and creepy. They even purchased a real human skeleton from India, as it was much more cheaper than purchasing an artificial one for the set. I think the low quality of the picture definitely adds to the grainy documentary-like feel of the film. It definitely feels like you're witnessing all of these things happen in the hot Texas sun, and it definitely makes things more unsettling whilst watching. It's difficult to make things appear scary anymore, especially for today's audience. However, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is something that I think will always be difficult to outdate, due to the realistic nature of the things that occur within the film. Also, for a movie called The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's hard to believe that the film features hardly any gore. And on top of that, it actually contains no sex and nudity, which is quite hard to believe for a film of its kind. It relies entirely on suspense and atmosphere in order to convey the gritty nature of the film, and that's why it's so great. The movie was released in 1974, way before any of the other popular slasher films were released, such as Friday the 13th and Halloween. I think it's safe to say that it set the bar for the slasher movies that followed, even though most movies of the same kind are unable to match its originality even today. I think the main reason this film is so terrifying is that it doesn't use anything supernatural within the film. They're actual human killers, and it's something that can actually happen. My version of the film is the standard UK release, which was released in 2006 or something, and I would definitely not recommend this release. The picture quality is even worse than any release I've ever seen of any movie, and it definitely doesn't add anything to the film, especially for a film of its age. So as you can see, it's not so grey, it doesn't fill the entire screen, there are no bonus features at all. And to actually watch this feature, I don't know if you can see that, but on my remote it says aspect, so I have to actually click aspect and scroll down. I actually have already tampered with all of these, but the best one is side cut zoom, and that way you're able to fill the entire screen. However, it still usually does cut stuff off the screen, and this is the best option that it actually has. Overall, it's one of the greatest original mainstream slasher films, and it still holds up as scary even to today's audiences. I rate it an 8 out of 10.